I have a bad habit when I play video games. I often have a tendency to ruin my own sense of creativity and discovery in favor of optimization and efficiency. While this sometimes makes sense in online games where you're playing with other people, a lot of my metagaming behavior has unfortunately carried over into single-player games as well. So when I saw Clair Obscur and was interested in playing it, I decided to challenge myself to beat the game without looking up guides, builds, 33 things I wish I knew before starting Clair Obscur videos, and of course, don't make these beginner mistakes videos. It was just going to be me and the expedition against the painteress. And there were times where I got stuck, like really stuck. A part of me almost begging to quickly Google strategies for certain bosses because a meta build is almost like a skill equalizer. But I never did, and in return I got one of the best gaming experiences I ever had. The only thing that kind of spoiled for me was a parry tip I saw on Instagram, but by that time I was already well into Act 2. It also helps that Clair Obscur is a truly unique and amazing game with a compelling and rich story and an even better soundtrack. Not a day has gone by since I picked up the game where I'm not humming dim, dum, da-dee-dum to myself. This game is one of a kind and it's my game of the year, maybe even my favorite game of all time. I've never been somebody who plays New Game Plus, but once I finished Clair Obscur, I immediately went back into New Game Plus to experience the game again. Because this video is more about the joy of playing games blind and gameplay, there will be no spoilers for Clair Obscur's story or themes, though I'm sure I'll talk about them sometime in the future. While most of this footage used in the video is from the prologue and the first act, there might be minor spoilers for some fights and overall gameplay. If you haven't tried Clair Obscur and it seems remotely interesting to you, do yourself a favor and go in blind. Otherwise, let's continue. Clair Obscur is a turn-based RPG, but with a twist. Because while you take turns to attack enemies, when you are attacked you have to actively dodge or parry enemy abilities. Dodging is easier and more lenient, but does no damage. Parry, meanwhile, has a tighter window, the same timing as a perfect dodge, but it also triggers a counterattack and does damage, so high risk, high reward. Common advice is to rely on dodging while learning enemy attack patterns, and once you've nailed the perfect dodge timing, you can upgrade to using parries. You can also just die a bunch of times. Clair Obscur quickly became notorious for being difficult because of the delays and fake-outs in some enemy attack animations, which causes a lot of players to parry too soon, sometimes multiple times in a row, only to miss the actual parry window and die. When I started Clair Obscur, I was unaware of all of this, but a combination of the story looking intriguing and seeing the anime-style counters in the trailer triggered me to give the game a try. I was wary, mostly because I bounced off the last turn-based RPG I tried pretty hard, and I basically concluded the genre wasn't for me. Especially the RPG part, building out characters and teams, had caused major issues for me in the past. While I love games like Temtem and Pokemon, I can never settle into just playing them with builds and loadouts I came up with myself. I eventually run into a roadblock where I find out the team that I spent hours building is just optimized completely wrong, and rather than taking it in stride and going back to earlier sections of the game, I used to get totally demotivated. When I was even younger, I remember playing Icewind Dale and just getting stuck eventually with a challenge I couldn't possibly overcome. Because Clair Obscur's parry and dodge system lets you block damage entirely, it removed all the anxiety around building my team wrong, and every time I ran into a wall despite wanting to Google a solution, I resisted and then relied on my own creativity to experiment with different characters and builds, and I used a skill-based system to my advantage. It even allowed me to do the hard content under-leveled. Early on in the game, however, I struggled a lot with the dodge and parry timing. This was way before I accidentally encountered the tip on an Instagram reel to listen for a sound before an attack. A lot of enemies have a sound cue that lines up with a perfect dodge or parry for their attack. This tip is solid, but it doesn't work for every enemy in the game, so you always have to listen and look for attack cues and really focus in on things that work for you. What part of the animation or its sound stand out, and can you reliably click the parry button around that cue? In my early game struggles, I didn't know any of this. While figuring out the timing by myself, watching my character's hitboxes closely, I wrote in my play notes, "After failing some bigger fights a few times, I get the urge to Google how to dodge better in this game. Or, if I have to change my build to get a better synergy. This is what I always do in harder games. Instead, I'm going to struggle through. I realized I was often too quick with my dodge or too slow, but when I did land one, it was very satisfying, especially when you land a parry that triggers a party-wide anime-style counterattack. I was also excited to discover a synergy between applying a mark with Gustav and then using that mark to get extra damage on Mael, or the many ways characters can build on status effects applied to the enemies, most notably Burn. Figuring this out made me want to experiment even more with my builds, and I used the recode ability to rebuild my character's attributes and skills very liberally. Well, as liberally as I was able to with the amount of recode items I found around the world. Sometimes I was just forced to make do, and I had no option to change it. When I did run into walls, I started wondering if it was just me or if the game was actually kinda difficult. Midway through the first act, I ran into a boss with a very annoying attack pattern. While a lot of abilities so far had been physical and melee, so you can see when the weapon is about to hit you, this boss also used cannons to shoot at you, and I just couldn't do it. To the point where I was going to run to Google to see if there was a clever way around the boss. If it weren't for me challenging myself to play the game blind and stick to it, I probably would have ended up watching a bunch of videos about meta builds to trivialize the boss like I've done with games like Elden Ring before. But I decided to stick with it, and when I did finally beat the boss by myself with my own build, I felt an incredible surge of dopamine and joy. I was even more invested in the game than before. While with other games where I'd use internet strategies to pass the boss, I would soon lose interest in the game, here I was even more excited to continue diving deeper and deeper into the world of Clair Obscur. And I learned to love every aspect of the game. Rather than the gameplay being an annoying hurdle to the lore and the story, it was another part of the game that I really, truly loved. In fact, the bosses that I had to do multiple times were way more fun and memorable than the ones that I ended up one-shotting. Playing Clair Obscur blind has given me an experience with a game I haven't had in a long time. A personal, immersive journey that I didn't want to spoil by Googling tips to quickly pass a hurdle. The hurdles and walls are the whole point of playing a game. While I used to always look up information or any tip of a game as soon as I got stuck, because I didn't want to waste my time, through playing Clair Obscur this way, I learned that those moments where you're wasting time running into a wall at full speed, dying, having to try again and again, are the best parts of the experience. The sense of accomplishment that follows after killing a boss just based on your own experimental build, under-leveled and with sweaty hands. While it's true Clair Obscur might have been the best possible game for this challenge and style of gameplay, I mean it's a solid game in many regards, it has taught me that this is the way I always want to play games, outside of moments where I'm playing with others. Like if I'm healing in World of Warcraft, I care more about being efficient, effective, and a team player. Well, when I play a single-player game, I want the experience to be the most important thing. And while the wall can be very frustrating, especially if you keep making the same mistakes, metagaming isn't the solution. It turns the gaming experience into a to-do list, and bosses are less about overcoming challenges and more about hurdles between you and the next area or story moment. My impatience, wanting to know where the story is going, has always won against my desire to have a fun and rewarding gameplay experience. And the story of Clair Obscur made me impatient to move on because I needed to know where it was going. But I'm so grateful that I didn't give in to my curiosity and impatience, because it gave me one of the best and most satisfying gameplay experience I've ever had. And I'm sure if I saw Clair Obscur's enemies and bosses as hurdles between me and the story, I wouldn't have gone back for New Game Plus. But in this case, I came for the story and the lore, and I stayed for the gameplay. So yeah, if you care about a game, just ignore all those one-shot builds and beginner tips and meta videos until you've gotten a solid feel for what you're doing with the game, because while it might help you clear the next boss, they might also ruin the whole game for you. Thanks for watching.